most kids, you start thinking at an early age, as soon as you look in the sky at night and you see stars, and you think, what would it be like to be up there?
I got into the Navy test pilot school and then started to apply to NASA.
There's like 6,000 people that applied for, 15 slots. And I interviewed 4 times over 12 years.
I applied multiple times over 13 years and interviewed 5 times before I was selected.
Well, I did submit 7 applications along the way, but
I got rejected by NASA 7 times, but the 8th time.
And the 4th time, I got a phone call that said, if you're still interested in being an astronaut, we'd like you to come to Houston.
Finally, it's launch day.
Launching to space, of course, was a momentous experience.
You see that this rocket is a living, breathing beast. The thing is alive, and it wants to go.
It suddenly feels like it's real.
First thing, you're strapped into the space shuttle on the launch pad,
and I can say sitting in the rocket, getting ready for launch, you're anxious and you're excited.
And waiting for countdown, focusing on doing your checklist, focusing on your procedure.
At the moment of launch, you're quite prepared.
It lights off and you feel the rumble, and then you start to move, and that constant smooth acceleration pulling you back in the seat.
And you feel like you're just in a car wreck because the solid rocket boosters light off and they give you a kick in the backside like you were just rear-ended at a stop sign, literally.
There's just nothing subtle or nice about it.
There was the vibration, the pressure, the acceleration, the pressure in your seat.
I distinctly remember the point when I stopped and thought, I did it. I'm here. My goal was to be an astronaut, and now I'm in space.
So the International Space Station, being only 250 miles above Earth, we call it the proving ground for a lot of science. It is a national orbiting laboratory for the United States, and we do have hundreds of science experiments going on at any time.
We're doing this amazing science up there. It is also absolutely the most wonderful observatory. And certainly for an Earth-facing observatory, the cupola module, this big bay window, that we have facing Earth, is the place to be.
I got visited by 3 space shuttles. Several of the crew members never looked outside the cupola before. I would bring them one at a time to the cupola. Tell them to close their eyes, open up all the windows, the shutters on the windows, and then tell them to open up their eyes.
Cerebrally, I knew that this was going to be a life-changing experience. I knew that the view was going to be amazing.
And I will never forget that sight. The thin blue line of the atmosphere, the curve of the horizon, and that's when it became real. Really, at a gut level, I'm actually in space. We are on orbit. This is not a sim.
This is my eyes looking through glass at Earth from space. It was almost overwhelming.
And so I think it's kind of overload for your brain and processing all of that at once, because it just isn't used to that.
It's really hard to describe something like that because it's not just cerebral, it's emotional, it's kind of all-encompassing. My heart was racing. You couldn't wipe the smile off of my face. It was really amazing. I just was, feeling something as I was staring at this view of the whole thing. And it moved me to tears unknowingly. So.
In that instant, when you're overwhelmed with that vista, when your eyes see nothing but the beauty of the Earth, every single crew member that I brought in there for that exposure cried. It is heart-stopping. It is soul-pounding. It is breathtaking.
I mean, it was ridiculous. I'd never imagined in my entire life getting to see something that beautiful. It was so foreign for the human mind to look at that, to see the Earth highlighted that way.
Well, I don't think anything prepares you for how crystal clear it is. You know, I knew the colors, but they just seemed different to me. They seemed more vibrant, more translucent.
I've never seen those colors here on Earth. These pearlescent yellows and peaches that form when you're looking at a body of water with the sun angle. It's just amazing. How in the world am I going to describe this? There's no words. There's no picture I could take to do it justice. There's no watercolors that I could put on paper to come close to the vividness, the ever-changing picture that I see staring at this planet.
And I think that's the challenge of really trying to express just what ran through my mind when I'd look out there, because my mind would just race.
It's like a work of art out the window there, and it surprises you every time you look at it.
We got to see some interesting things up there. You know, one was Hurricane Dorian, a Category 5 hurricane with you know, such a well-formed eye. When you look down at it, flying over in the station, it doesn't even look like it's moving, but you know the power that's at the center of that storm and what havoc that storm is wreaking on everybody on the ground.
You look at it in terror, really, because you know all the people that are endangered underneath, but just the immensity of power that Mother Nature brings.
A hurricane, a thunderstorm, everywhere you look, there is the environment doing something crazy. So we're coming up over Brazil, about to go across into the Atlantic Ocean, and looking out on the horizon, I saw looked kind of brown. I'd never seen that really from the space station, and I instantly, what did I think? Human interaction pollution, for sure. It's just awful looking, it's terrible. But as we went over the Atlantic, it kind of got thicker and thicker and thicker. It was a sandstorm in the Sahara Desert, blowing this huge plume of sand up into the atmosphere, crossing the Atlantic Ocean and coming down in Brazil. I mean, that is crazy. If that doesn't change the way you think about the planet, absolutely nothing will.
What struck me was when we looked at natural disasters, you see a flood, and you really can't pick out where they are on Earth. But when you see it from space, you realize that the effects of these natural disasters really hit everybody equally. And it really gives you this perspective that, you know, first of all, we're all in this together, and that the world is very small.
When you first look at Earth, you may say, wow, that's a continent. And then you look at it again the next day and you say, wow, there are mountain ranges. And then you look at it again the next day and it's like, oh, I can see synclines and anticlines in the geologic structure.
You could see the Nile River and the Nile Delta so clearly, the Red Sea. And for me, that was just amazing to look down. You could see the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea. And I was just thinking, this is where all this took place.
The color palette is hard to compare. I mean, all these reds and oranges, and so the dunes all over in Central Africa and in Saudi Arabia, you have these so many different textures.
And you can almost pick out where you are over the Earth, because Australia's tans are different than African tans.
Every piece of the Earth has its own tone, if you want. So you become very acquainted with the Earth from a big picture point of view.
And you saw just the beauty of the landscape and the mountains and the deserts, and you start to think of how they were formed. You realize just how special the place we are is, and you feel that connection.
So when you look at the Earth from that vantage point, I know others have said this, you don't see the borders. You don't see political borders, you hardly see geographical borders.
Flying over Africa in the daytime with the intense sunlight so much of the time, you don't really see much detail. It's so bright. But at night, when it's illuminated by starlight and moonlight, you really see a lot, and it's just fascinating.
And you don't quite see the same texture, but you see mankind's influence on the planet.
You get these beautiful, twinkly city lights.
And they represent human sprawl, which isn't necessarily bad, but it is incredibly beautiful from space.
I love looking at the atmosphere at night when you have that air glow, and sometimes it was a bit green, and then you have the aurora dancing around.
And we were flying into this astonishing aurora, this rippling, pulsing river of green that's down below us, the red that is stretching up to our altitude. It's like, it was just breathtaking.
Auroras, the presence of humans at night, it's obvious with the lights. But it's the death around the Earth that's startling. How this beautiful, shining oasis of life is there naked in the middle of pitch black death, a vacuum of space.
I mean, the Milky Way is just stunning.
There's many things in the cosmos to gaze at. And for example, the Magellanic Clouds, those show up really bright and vivid because you don't have atmospheric scattering. You can see Andromeda, the spiral galaxy of Andromeda.
Of course, the lights don't flicker. They're steady because they're not coming through the dust and coming through the atmosphere. And then as you really adjust, you start to sense the very subtle colors that are in the stars. A little bit of reddish, a little bit of bluish, blue-white.
Just all the colors and the light come out, in that depth of space as well.
I could all of a sudden detect depth. Now, I couldn't tell you how much, but it's light years, right? And it's like, whoa, I can somehow tell that star is closer than that star. And that was something that knocked my socks off. And I thought, nobody told me about this.
People ask if there's aliens, and I'm like, of course there are aliens. Look at all those stars. There's got to be.
It's just so vast and infinite that I don't know what else to say about that.
Frequently, in the summertime, there's a lot of fires in Africa. You see all of those plumes of smoke heading west across the Atlantic.
You fly over South America and you see, widespread deforestation, and you know the impact that has. You can almost get a sense of the balance of, how nature is trying to balance all the inputs and the outputs and have a stable system. And you can see our effect on it.
To me, it started to make me understand that everything is connected. What is happening in the ocean over here can affect what is happening on land over here. It's just all one being, thing, and it's all interconnected.
You can see combat. I mean, we were two countries were at war, and you could very easily see missiles being shot. They just look like little tiny traces of light. You can see all that stuff. So to me, I didn't see one unified human civilization. You certainly see one unified planet cruising around the sun, and that is a unique perspective.
But during my time on the space station, I had the chance to do a spacewalk, put on a spacesuit and go outside. And that's a very special experience for any astronaut.
You're inside the space station or the shuttle, and now you put on a suit and go outside. It's like there is an elevation and risk when you do that, but it is a bit thrilling.
Spacewalks always seem to be very busy and task-focused events where I got to do this and I got to move over here and do this. And
And then you just have to not think about where you are. Just concentrate on getting the job done. What's the big picture?
Rarely did you have a minute where you could just say, just take a minute and enjoy the view. But, there were those minutes every once in a while. And the view from outside the spacecraft, with that full panoramic vision through your helmet visor, was just incredible.
It's a very disturbing view looking down about 240 miles at the Earth going by at 17,000 miles an hour. It's like, oh boy.
I just watched the Earth going by below me, and I only had this, thin visor separating me from a very unsurvivable atmosphere. And my feet were dangling. I remember, not just through my visor, but looking down and you just see feet and then Earth, and you're holding onto the space station. And it was just incredible. Everything looked so large.
The colors are even more vibrant. And I think also just mentally, psychologically realizing that, there's nothing between the vacuum of space except for this spacesuit and your visor.
But oh my gosh, you see Earth and you see your glowing station around you, and you realize, okay, I gotta stop looking at this stuff, because it becomes a distraction to the work that you're doing out there.
And the great thing about living on space station, I loved every minute of it. I had a countdown going, but it was, oh no, I only have 2 months left.
All right, one last look at the Earth. This is some good news. The Earth is still beautiful. An Earth in crisis is still an Earth worth returning to.
Life seems extremely busy, and the days start flying by, and before you know it, it's over. As it drew to a close, I think I was more feeling as though, did you do enough to capture this so that you can share it when you get home? And so that you can light those fires in people as you go around and talk about this and try to, ignite the passion in kids just like I had ignited for me as a kid. And you're back on the ground, and somebody else is doing the job up there now. It makes you feel like, this is a really big thing that we're a part of, and I'm fortunate to play my part.
It is the fact that going to space and seeing the Earth from that vantage point has a life-changing effect on most of us.
It takes a lot of energy to describe what it's like up there, because there's so much of your emotion built into it. I think the best way to describe it is that your viewpoint changes, that you can look at the same thing, but it changes the lens through which you see it.
And that acute concrete realization that we belong to Earth and not vice versa, it's kind of a mental shift to see that we just nowhere else we could go.
I think if you're not a conservationist before you go to space, you're at least partly a conservationist when you come back, because when you see how thin that atmosphere is, that protective layer that we have here, you think, wow, we really have to take care of this, because it does look so fragile from space.
If you could get 7 billion people to go up there and look down for just even 30 seconds, you would change them, all of them, forever. They wouldn't all come back and be friends. They wouldn't all come back and tear down border walls and things like that. But you would change all of them, and you would change them all for the better, and they would have a different view of the planet.
I think if people that can lift their eyes up and see the bigger picture, whether it's from orbit or even just understanding the different sides, maybe spending more time listening, rather than shouting.
And that's what I want people to find. I absolutely found that in the experience I had in space, in the simple facts of us living on a planet and all being Earthlings, and the only border that matters is that thin blue line.